Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Everybody glad to be here this morning? Yeah. You sound like it. Very enthusiastic crowd. You know, one of the great words of the Old Testament that I really enjoy is Jehovah Jireh. You know, God is my provider. So we see what God's doing in that ministry, and God will always provide at the right time and the right need. He's always right on time. He's never asleep. So, amen for that. Today's text, Brent will be speaking on Ephesians 6, 13. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Let's pray. Oh, gracious and heavenly Father, thank you for your word that you have for us today, God. Father, I pray that you will anoint Brent's lips, God, that you will bless him, God. I pray that we will be able to stand firm in the evil days, that we will begin to put on this full armor of God that we have, God. Father, I pray that we just continue to seek your face, continue to seek your kingdom, God, and your glory. In Christ's precious name, amen.
Thank you, Stace. Thank you. Well, we get to experience a little bit what it's like to be in the first century church. They had no modern day conveniences and technologies. The screen doesn't work, so we don't have any of these technologies, and I don't care. Sometimes it's better that way. It makes you kind of have to lean on your Bible and make you more attentive and listen sometimes, so it's okay. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13. We've been going through this series dealing with Let's Prepare for War, and we've been looking at the importance of, as Christian people, understanding the very nature of the battle that we're in. Thomas Brooks, a 16th century pastor, one of these dead old guys that I like, said this, that every Christian should know Christ, the Scriptures, their own heart, and Satan's devices. He said, these are the four prime things that should be first and most studied and church. I think the church does a lot of good job with Christ, the Scriptures, pretty much with our own heart, but sometimes not so much with Satan's devices. Those four things in the Christian life are hugely important. So we've been going through this series, Let's Prepare for War, doing this study, Ephesians 6, 10 through 20, to look at the nature of the war that we're in, the armor that we're supposed to put on, and how we actually supposed to fight this battle. All right, now listen to me. Everybody good? Stand up for a second, because there's some tired faces out there. I already see you coming. All right? All right, let's do the hokey pokey. Everybody turn around for a second, you know? All right? Shake your neighbor's hand for a second. Everybody shake your neighbor's hand. Say, good to see you today. If you're a husband or wife, at least act like it. All right, there you go, Stace. Here we go. All right, let's take a seat again. Why are you doing that for, Brent? Because we're about to engage in something that is tremendously huge, and the devil would have nothing more for you to make you so tired you fall asleep that you don't pay attention. And he's clever at doing that. So I know we're tired, a lot of things going on. So let's dig into this, because this is weighty, it's huge, and it's important. So here's what we've learned so far in verse 10 through 11. We have the verses 10 through 11. It's been Paul describing for us that there are certain preparations that we need to prepare ourselves for before we engage in this battle. And so what we looked at last week was the fact that before Paul even tells, verse 14 is, from verse 14 down to verse 17, Paul's going to give us the specific weapons of our war that we're to use in this battle against the devil. But before he even tells us what those weapons are, there are some preparations that have to be made first. Those came in verse 10 through 11. And we looked last week that in verses 10 through 11, there are three specific preparations that an individual needs to have in order to fight the devil, to use the weapons appropriately. Just like when a young man wants to go off to war, they do not send him out into the field first, they send him through boot camp. So that in the boot camp, it trains his mind mentally, emotionally, and physically, and how to use the weapon so he's properly trained when he gets on the field, so he doesn't do something crazy and doesn't get hurt. Same thing here. Before God gives anyone the weapons, there's certain preparations that have to be made. Three of those that we looked at last week, let's just recap real quickly. The first preparation, that you had to be in the right condition. The right condition is in verse 10. Paul is writing to Christian people and saying, you need to be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. If you try to fight the devil, addiction, or anything going on in your life by your own strength, that's the devil's greatest deception, to make you think that you actually can in your own power. It will not work, and it cannot work. The strength to fight the devil's war comes from a strength and a source outside of yourself, dwelling in yourself, so that out of you and through you, in his power, you can defeat a foe that's much more powerful than you, but not as powerful as God. The first preparation to fight this war is that you got to be in the right condition. We have to be strong in the Lord. The second preparation for this war that we looked at last week is that you got to wear the right protection. Paul says in verse 11 that we are to put on the full armor of God. Full armor of God. And each of these pieces of the armor that we're going to begin looking at next week in verses 14 through 18, Paul is telling these people here that when you go into this war against the devil, every single piece of this armor, the full armor, needs to be put on. No part should be missing. At any piece of the armor that's missing is going to be the piece the devil is going to exploit in you, whether it's your mind, your emotions, your heart, whatever. Whatever piece is not being worn is the piece the devil is going to attack at. The third preparation we looked at last week is that we got to have the right position. Paul says in verse 11, put on the full armor of God that you may be able to stand firm against the devil's schemes. The word for schemes here is where we get our English word for method. There are different methods and organizational structures that the devil uses to plot to come against us, to assassinate us, to ambush us, to wail on us, to distract us, to get at us, that we have to be cautious of. And Paul says the way that you, the preparation you have to have in regards to Satan's schemes is that you got to have the right kind of position. You got to be willing to stand. And that word for stand is a military position. Means you're ready to, at all costs, you have a firm grip. You're ready to take on anything that comes to you. All right, everyone good so far? So in verse 10 through 11, we learned there's a preparation for the battle. You have to be prepared in the right condition. You got to be prepared with the right protection. You got to be prepared with the right position. Then we looked at verse 12 a couple weeks ago and looked at what is this war all about? Who are we really against? And so Paul says in verse 12 that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, powers, forces of darkness, against spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. In other words, Paul is saying here that we are in this battle as Christians, and even if you're non-Christian, you're still in this battle anyway, is that there is a hierarchy of unseen beings called demons that you cannot see, that are highly organized and structured, that want to kill, and destroy, and annihilate your life, and take your life, a very hard-minded soul from you. And Paul says this is the battle that these Christians need to be preparing for, because it's a battle that you cannot fight in natural ways. It's a battle you only fight in spiritual ways. Everybody there with me? That's a recap of 2 weeks worth of sermons in about 3 minutes. Can't you preach that way, Brent? No, sorry. So here we come to verse 13 today. We're going to land on verse 13. We're just going to focus on verse 13 before we start looking at the armor next week. What we're going to find in verse 13 is, in verses 10 to 11, we know the preparations that's needed to be in the war. Verse 12, we know the war who we're against. Verse 13, if I could title it today, it's the response of how to fight the war when it comes. Or is this a godly response to a demonic war? The preparations are made. We know who the fight is against. Now when it comes, how are we supposed to respond? Everybody follow me? Does that flow? Easy? You may think, well, why do you go so meticulous over certain details? Because I want you to walk out of here knowing something. It doesn't matter to me if you come in here and just, oh, that was nice. I want you to be able to walk out of here thinking, I learned something I didn't know from that text. Even if I have to break it down to a level that gets almost monotonous. I do, and I don't apologize if that bores you or is, monotonous to you. But that's just the way that I do it, because I want you to grab a hold of this. So, let's look at this text. The godly response to demonic war. The preparations are made. We know who the battle is against. Now it's time to respond. So think about it like this. Josh and Amber, you guys are EMTs, right? So when Josh and Amber respond to, or anybody else is EMT or firefighter or whatever, if you get a call that there has been a bad accident that's happened, or there has been a situation that's happened, when the EMTs arrive on the scene, they don't wait to get on the scene to prepare to respond. No, they get on the scene to respond because they're already prepared. Does that make sense? In the same way with the battle with the devil, you don't wait till it happens, think, oh, I got to respond, how do I do this? No, you are already prepared ahead of time so that when it comes, you know how to appropriately respond. If they get a call of an emergency of a wreck, They don't have to figure out, how do I do now? Let me read a book about how to do CPR and stop the flow of blood and all this kind of stuff before I get there and hope that I can figure it out. No, they've already studied that ahead of time, so they're already prepared and trained to do that. So when they get there, they just do it. Even if it's in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, nothing catches them by surprise. They are constantly ready to respond. So in this text, the preparation is in verse 10 and 11, so that when verse 12, the attacks of these beings come, verse 13 says, now here's how you respond to them when they come your way. All right? So let's look at this text. Paul says the word therefore. The very first word he says in verse 13. If you don't have a Bible, and there's a Bible anywhere around you, grab that Bible, because we're not going to have it on the screen, or you can listen. Verse 13, the very first word Paul says is, therefore. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. The word therefore is a connective word to say that what he said in verse 10, 11, and 12 is going to find its connection in what he's about to say in verse 13. In other words, it doesn't make a matter. It's a new word. It doesn't matter if you understand verses 10, 11, and 12 if we don't do verses 13, because they're all connected together by that word therefore. Right? Now, here's the first thing that I want, that there are three things in particular that I believe that Paul brings out for us in this text that's going to tell us, here's what we need to do in response to when the devil attacks. Here's number one, is that we need to respond with active resistance. All right, can anybody say that? Active resistance. Okay, how do you get that, preacher? Okay, notice that he says here in verse 13, take up the full armor of God, that you will be able to resist in the evil day. Now, that word there for resist in the Greek language is a word that means antihistemi. It's actually where we get our word antihistamines, which is a blocker. Right, Brett? Is that a blocker? He's a nurse. It's a blocker. So that word in the original language means to stand against and to oppose. So, what Paul is saying here is that when the devil and his demons attack us in the variety of forms, whenever he does and whenever he will, and he will do it in accordance to his timetable and not our own, Paul says the response is, you don't run at him and try to tackle him yourself, because he'll wear you out. You don't run away like a little, sissified Christian and say, oh, then he just uses that fear to manipulate you. You just simply stand. And you stand, as we're going to see, with this armor on that he's going to give us, and you look and you're ready to say, okay, bring it. I'm not afraid, I'm not intimidated, no matter what you bring. Bring your temptation, bring your thoughts, bring your fears, bring the anxiety, bring these emotions on. Come on, and here we go. I'm going to stand and not stand in your strength. I'm going to oppose you in the strength that God has given me by the weapons he's given me to use against you. All right, so... And we can have the confidence that if we will actively resist the devil, and this is hugely important, if we will actively resist the devil, the promise is the devil will flee from us. And here's the thing, because there are many of you who will sit here today, you have had unbelievable things come against your mind. Addictions that has controlled you for your entire life. And certain things just kind of come over you, and you feel like your whole entire life, I have never been able to break these things. I can't stop these. When it comes, I feel it coming. I can't pinpoint it, but I know it's there. Maybe it's what you're talking about, Brent. And your entire life, you've either tried to run away from it, tried to fight it your own way, and God just says, put some armor on and stand right there. And if you'll just stand, I'll through you, work out of you my power, and that thing bothering you is going to leave you. And how do I know that? Because Romans 8:37-39 says, in all these things, we overwhelmingly conquer through him, not through us, through him who loved us. And then he says this, I am convinced neither death, life, angels, principalities, devils, demons, nor things present, nor things to come, powers, height, nor depth, nor any created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. If you're going through a battle today, you need to understand this war is coming against you. You need to take the confidence. If you just stand, the war is going to be won. And that's great news. Let me show you how this works, though. Because we look at that word resist, and one of the things that we should ask ourselves was, what does that word mean exactly? What's it mean to resist, to oppose the devil. Does that mean I'm just supposed to stand there when he comes and hope that I look strong enough and big enough and scary enough? I got you, devil, you're going to run from me. No, that's stupid. He didn't care about that because he's much more uglier and scarier looking than you are, probably. At least me. So, what's it mean to stand and resist this devil? Well, I guess if I could put an example, it would be like this. It consists of two things. It consists of, first of all, an attitude of the mind correlated with the action of the will. All right, so how does this work? Give me a practical example. Let's just say that you're sleeping one night, and if you're a man, you're with your wife and kids, you're with your wife, your kids in the room, you hear something break in the living room. You hear something break in the living room, and at first you think, oh, it's the kids are up or something crazy, the cat's running around, the dog got in something. But you keep on hearing glass breaking, and you hear it. You begin to realize that a robber is trying to get into your house. At that moment, when you realize that a robber has gotten into your house, the first reaction, I'm going to go grab my kids, and I'm going to bring them into the room with my wife. If I hear that robber coming, the first thing I'm going to do is have a proper mental attitude to say, I don't care what this guy has or does, I'm going to stand here and defend my family at all costs, even if it comes to the point even if there's going to be an altercation, I don't care. My attitude in this moment is I will oppose him at all costs. Now, along with that, you can also take a baseball bat, a golf club. In my case, you come into my house, you might be met with a little 38 special or a 357, so don't try it. So, and a sword. But regardless, if I know that robber is coming into my house, the first thing I'm going to do is have the attitude, I'm going to oppose him at all costs. And then, with my own will, I'm going to take a certain weapon, along with my attitude, I take my will to grab a weapon to say, bring it. I don't care what it is, because I love my family, I will oppose you. So, the opposition starts with an attitude of, I will oppose you at all costs, but also an act of the will. You may grab a weapon to say, I'm going to stop you because you're not going to get my kids. Okay, so here's the thing. When it comes to the devil, it starts with the right attitude. You realize, devil, I know you're going to come at me, but I'm not going to let you get me. Because here's the thing, the devil is the most clever thief and robber that's ever existed. How do you know that? Let me give you some scriptures. Jesus would say in John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I come, they may have life and have it abundantly. The devil's a robber. Jesus would say in Matthew 13:19, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away, what's been sown in his heart. That's the devil being like a robber. 2 Corinthians 4:4, the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers that they may not see the light of the gospel. The devil's there to steal the gospel from their mind. 2 Corinthians 11:3 says, Paul writing to the Corinthians says, I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your mind will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of the devotion to Jesus. Paul was making it clear the devil, like a thief and a robber, is there to steal away from their mind what they've been taught. So that reminds us that the devil is like a robber who wants to come into the house of your soul and invade your heart and your mind and your emotions and rob that from you. And if a robber came into my house, the first thing I'm going to do is, my attitude is, man, I'm going to oppose you at all costs. But as an act of the will, I will do whatever it takes to stop that robber with a weapon if I need to oppose him to getting from, I'm not going to stand there and say, oh, do I look pretty scary today? Look at me in these shorts and put my shirt off. Do I look pretty scary? You're like, what the heck, man? Get out of the way. But if I stand there and I have a weapon in hand, he's going to oppose, he's going to probably either flee or like, oh, man, same attitude has to be with the devil. We have to say, okay, you're going to come at us, I'm going to stand here. I'm just not going to stand here. I'm going to stand with my weapons in hand. Say, I've got the armor of God on, devil. I've got the sword of the Spirit. I've got the helmet of salvation. I've got my breastplate on. I've got my shoes on. We're going to read here. I've got this on, man, so bring it. That's the attitude we have to have in order to resist the devil. Because the devil, again, I'll say this, is more afraid of you than you are of him. But his trickery is to make you think that he's more powerful than you, to get your guard down and put your weapons down, to make you run or come at him in your own power and not just stand in the armor and the power of God. Does that make sense? All right, so this is the thing it takes the first thing to understand about the responding to the devil when he comes to attack us in a variety of forms, which we'll look at throughout the entirety of this passage and the course of this sermon, is that it begins with an active resistance. It's an attitude of the mind along with an action of the will. You constantly understand you are going to oppose the devil at all costs with the weapons that God gives you to be able to fight. Now, I also want you to notice also about this passage is that not only are we supposed to resist, but we always need to have a continual attitude and a continual awareness of the fact that we need to resist, because we never know when the attack is going to come. Notice what it says here in verse 13. He says, take up the armor of God that you will be able to resist. And then it says, in the what? What's your version say? Anybody? In the evil day. In the day of evil. Anybody else version say different?
Time of evil.
In the time of evil. Now, what you see there I think is interesting, because does it tell you the exact time it's going to happen? And does it tell you the exact day when it's going to come? No. It doesn't tell you the day or the time it's going to come, but what it does tell you is that the day is going to come. Does it not? Paul makes the case that in the day of evil, which suggests that if you are a follower of God, you can't escape the fact that it's going to come. It is going to come. The reality is how are you going to deal with it when it comes? And if you're not continually aware of the reality that this day is going to come, then you're not going to be prepared and you're not going to respond appropriately, and he will get you. The word here is called the evil day. That's what it says. In the NASB, it says, in the evil day. That word there for evil means to do that which is morally and ethically wrong. The word day there literally means between dusk to dawn. So what that means is this, is that the devil at any time, at any place, at any location, will seek, no matter what time or where it's at, to get you to do that which is ethically and morally wrong in God's standard. That's what he will do on a regular basis. It's just that sometimes he does it greater times than he does others. But Paul's making the case here is that we must continually be aware and ready to resist him whenever he comes. Does that make sense? We good? Just like when the army takes off heading through the woods. I mean, you don't put your guard down. I'm sure that they don't put their guard down at any moment. There's a continual awareness that there's always the possibility that something may come, the enemy may invade, and we always have to be aware and prepared to respond no matter when they come. That should be the exact attitude, because we don't know when the evil day is going to come. And maybe you're walking in the mall and there comes a beautiful lady walking by. It could be that you're watching TV. It could be that you're in a conflict with somebody. It could be your kids are going crazy and how you're going to respond in that moment. It could be a variety of things the devil uses to bring evil throughout the day. Temptations, deceptions, and confusion. But it doesn't matter how he comes and which way he does it. We have to be continually aware in order to be able to appropriately respond. That's why Peter said, Ephesians, 1 Peter 5:8, be of sober spirit and be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And once again, he's clever at his devices. He got Eve with pride, Cain through jealousy. He got Joseph with disappointment, David with lust, Solomon with idol worship, Judas with money, Ananias and Sapphira with greed, Saul with deception, Peter with guilt, and the disciples to flee with fear. And you look at those list of names, some of us are not near as spiritual as what these people would be, and if you could get them, he can very cleverly get us. There's always an awareness we have to have. But here's another thing about this I want you to note as well. You noticed that, again, the first point here, how to respond to the demonic attack when it comes. First of all, you respond by active resistance. But it is interesting here that Paul says that you will be able to. You will be able to resist. You see that there? He says you will be able. The word there for able means that you will have an ability to actually make him be resisted. And that word there for able means a source not of your own strength, but a source coming into you that enables you to be able to have the power to fight the devil. So this is what's important that we need to grab a hold of is that the devil can actually be resisted. Can you say that?
Yeah.
The devil can actually be resisted. Paul would not have ever said you will be able to resist unless the fact the devil could be resisted. But again, he will come at you so heavy and so hard as to make you think and overwhelm you so much that he can't be. But Paul already said he can be. In fact, if you look through the scriptures, you will find, like in James 1:19, that the demons believe, and it says they also shudder. That word there literally means to quake with fear. We read about Mark chapter 9, verse 25 through 26, that when Jesus was encountering this demonic spirit, he walks up to this spirit and says, "You deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him and not enter it again." After crying out, falling into terrible convulsions, the demon came out and the boy was like a corpse.
but he was healed. Mark 1, 23-26, Jesus walks into a synagogue. Just then a man in the synagogue with an unclean spirit cried out, saying, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Come out of him," throwing him into convulsions. The unclean spirit cried out with a loud voice and came out of him. We read the story just a couple weeks ago about the demons inside of the man of Mark chapter 5. There was a legion of demons, and at one word the demons leave, and 2,000 of them go to the pigs and kill them. In Luke 10:17, Jesus gave the authority for the disciples to go and heal people and preach the message and cast out demons. And it says that when they came back, the response was that they said to Jesus, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And I say that to show you in these passages that anytime Jesus ever encountered a demon in any way, the demons had to flee because of the authority and power of Christ. And when demons attack and the devil attacks us in our life, if we stand and we resist him in the power of God, the same thing that Jesus did when he encountered demons and the devil is the same power that can rest in you, that when they come your way and you stand in that power, they will have the same type of reaction. It hasn't changed. So it's encouraging for us to understand. James even says in James chapter 4, verse 7, if we submit to God and resist the devil, he will flee from you. So the first thing we learn from this text about the proper response when the word comes is that it has to be met with active resistance. That's number one. Here's number two, is that when the word comes, however it comes, we have to respond with a serious readiness for action. Here's what I mean by that. At the beginning of verse 13, he says here, "Take up the full armor of God." Now, in verses 10 down to verse 13, this is the second time that Paul has mentioned about putting on the armor of God. Now listen to what he says the first time. In verse 11, he says, "Put on the full armor of God." In verse 13, he says, "Take up the full armor of God." Did you see the difference? Let me say it again. In verse 11, Paul says, "Put on the full armor of God." In verse 13, he says, "Take up the full armor of God." Did you hear the difference? Let me say it again. Verse 11 says, "Put on the full armor of God." Verse 13 says, "Take up the full armor of God." In verse 11, Paul says, you need to put the armor on. But in verse 13, he says, not about putting it on, he says, take it up. Well, what's the difference? In verse 11, when he says put the armor on, that word literally means to put it on you and wear it and never take it off of you. To take up, that word means to assume position, to take what's already on you and use it when appropriate. All right, so example of this. A policeman. When the policeman checks in to duty, one of the first things he's going to do to come to work with is that he's going to have his gear on, is he not? He's going to have his taser, he's going to have his cuffs, he's going to have his gun, he's going to have all the weapons that he needs on. He's going to put that on before he comes into the job. Does he ever take it off as long as he's on the job? No. Does that mean he's always going to use his taser every time he drives down the road, and every time he walks into a house, he's always going to have to pull out his gun and always going to have to pull out his taser? No. But he puts it on so that if he ever has to use it, he can take it out and use it immediately. What Paul's saying here is that, Christians, you always wear the armor. But there may be days where you don't have to use it as much as other days. But there's going to be some days you're going to have to take out your sword of the Spirit and use it. You're going to have to put on the helmet of salvation more than others because this day the devil's coming at your mind. There's going to be other days that you're going to have to put on the breastplate of righteousness because he's trying to attack your emotions more than the other days. Just like a cop, when he walks into certain houses, he always has his gear on, but he's always ready to take it out in a moment if he needs to use it. Does that make sense? What Paul's trying to say here, he's telling the Christians now, put the armor on. He then tells them in verse 12, here's the reason why. You need to keep it on at all times because you've got an unseen demonic war coming against you and you don't know when they're going to come. So that when they come, bam, then take it up right now and use it immediately. There's a sense of urgency that's here that needs to be done. Does that make sense? So, you know, it's like this. Dude, there comes the gun. Debbie Overly's gave me a little thing I can stick in the top of my mouth, but I forgot to bring it today, so. It's like this. Paul, in verse 11, he's telling these Christians, hey, in a general way, put the armor on. But then after he describes to them the seriousness of the situation in verse 12 against who they're against, now it's not just put it on, but hey, take it up. And can I give you what the actual definition of what it means is this? It's like this. Hey, come on, take it, come on, hurry! That's what it's like. Like, jerk up there, what are you getting so excited for? Because I'm trying to give you, because I'm trying to express to you the emphasis of what the word is saying. It's not like, oh yeah, take this up. Now let's play patty cake together and put it on, stress you. Paul is saying, listen, take this thing up. You know what's coming against you, so do it and do it quickly. It's like this. If you go on a cruise or on a ship somewhere, when you get on the ship, the man may tell you, hey, listen, in case we go down, there's some life jackets over here. In general, he's going to tell you, yeah, there's life jackets. And most of us are going to be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Cool, it's there. Really don't care. We're honest. But I guarantee you, if that ship hits some sort of rock along the way and it began to bust from the bottom and the ship is sinking, he is not going to get on the microphone and say, oh, folks, just want to let y'all know that we've got some life jackets around and just want to let you know, enjoy your buffet. He would say that if the situation is not as serious. But once he realizes the boat's going down, he's going to say, hey guys, life jackets on now. Alert, alert, life jackets on now. What changed? The situation at hand and the danger at hand warrants him with more emphasis to say, put on your life jacket because the danger that's at hand. In verse 11, Paul tells him, hey, yeah, put the armor on, you need to put it on. But then after he describes why they need to put it on in verse 12, because of the war, now he says, now you really need to put it on. Because it's a matter of seriousness. You see, there's going to be times when the devil's going to come and attack your thoughts, and you need to take up the sword of the Spirit to swack off those thoughts that's going to come to your mind. There's going to be times when the devil's going to come at your emotions with depression and anxiety and overwhelm you with shame and guilt. It's at that moment you need to put the breastplate of righteousness on. We're going to look at this. There's going to be times when the devil's going to send temptations your way in many different forms. That's going to be a time you're going to have to take up that shield of the faith and block those arrows of the devil and temptations when they come. There's going to be times when lies and deceptions are going to be sent your way, and that's going to be a time where you've got to be held together by the belt of truth that Paul's going to tell us to put on. There's always this awareness and this seriousness of an attitude that we have to have in regards to this war and being willing to take up that armor at any moment and use it appropriately. Here's the last thing is this. First of all, we are to respond to the war, first of all, by having active resistance. Secondly, we respond by having a serious awareness to take it up and call to act when the time call comes. But here's the third thing is this, is that we're to respond when it comes with confident resolution. Notice verse 13 says, therefore take up the full armor of God that you will be able to resist in the day of evil. And then he says this, and having done everything to stand firm, then verse 14 says, then just stand firm. 3 times in verses 10 through 14, Paul reemphasizes that if you want to fight this war against the devil, you do it by standing in the power of God. But I want you to see this here. When he says here, verse 13, having done everything to stand, then stand, what's he talking about? Having done everything. Anybody know? If you keep this verse in context, he tells them here, having done everything to stand, then stand. What's the everything he's already told them to do? So he's insinuating that the person who's going to put this on is already prepared to do so. They understand the war they're in, and they're ready to respond. He says, if you've already done all that, then you're ready to stand. If you haven't done that, you can stand, but you're going to fall pretty quickly. So people come a lot of times to me and talk to me about different things going on in life and battles against the devil. And a lot of the problem could probably be solved in a person's life if they would do 10 and 11 and respond like in verse 13. But many people just don't want to. They want the easy, quick fix. God, you take care of this. God will never do something for you that you yourself do not want to do. If you don't want to take up his armor and fight the strength that he gives you, he's not going to do it for you unless you yourself want to do it. But if you do it in those ways, and you do everything you need to do, and you just stand in that power, it's not a possibility. It's a guarantee the devil will flee from you. And so he says here in this passage, after you've done everything to stand, he says, then stand. Again, you will never find it anywhere in the entire Bible where it says that we're to actively and openly come against the devil on our own power. We're never even told to flee from him. The only time we're ever told to flee in the Bible is to flee from sin. But it tells us here to stand. On a rainy day, with rain coming down and pouring down, there's only one way you can walk outside and actually not get wet. You know how that is? Well, you don't go, but you walk outside. An umbrella. But the umbrella isn't going to protect you from the rain unless you do something with that umbrella. You can open it and still not use it. It's nice. It kind of blocks the rain from the side. It's coming sideways, I guess. But you can have a torrential downpour coming against you and all around you and it not touch you. If you would just open up the umbrella and then you just simply stand under it. Now, would it not be stupid to say, okay, Lord, I see it's raining, so I'm going to take the avenue of the umbrella that you've given me to block me from the rain, and I'm just going to put it down and hope that you stop the rain from coming. And if you don't, then by golly, you must not be God, and I don't like you, and I can't stand you because you're not. That's just foolishness. He's giving you the means of the umbrella to protect yourself, to stand under it so you don't get wet. That's what it is in this battle. If we will just take the umbrella that God gives us, his word and the armor of God, and you take it and he says, now I want you to put it on. And like the umbrella, you flip it up and you put it on yourself, you begin now to be showered from the temptations. Not that they're going to come. You can't stop the rain from coming. You can just stop yourself from getting wet. But you can't prevent it from coming. The devil is going to come no matter who you are or what you are. But there is protection that you can use, just like an umbrella you can stand under. That although it rages around you and is warring against you and coming down hard against you, if you would just stand under the authority of Christ and in the authority of Christ through the armor of God that we're going to read about, no matter what's happening around you and how hard that it gets, it cannot touch you. You guys tracking with me? Now, this message has been a little bit short today because I knew Liz was going to be talking. I want to give her time to share about her mission, the Psalm 82:3 mission. But here's the thing. We can shake our heads and say, I get all this, that's nice, that's clever, 3 points. But what are we going to do about it now? That's the ultimate thing. You see, and because Paul is drawing his image here from a Roman army, he's probably looking at a Roman officer when he's making his images here. If you were living in the first century, and Paul says stand firm, if you were in the first century, you would go to what you would remember what the Roman army does. In these days, when the Roman army began to get invaded, as a means to protect themselves, what they would do is they would huddle up. And they would stand 6 feet apart from each other with their shields up. And every 6 feet of area was theirs. The next 6 feet of area was your partner's. The next 6 feet of area was, they stood together, not just to protect that 6 foot of area for themselves, but they knew if they didn't protect that area for themselves and they got killed, then so would their partner as well. If they didn't stand firm. Do you see that if for no other reason, first of all, we need to learn to stand firm in these things. When the devil comes in many different ways at us, first of all, for our own personal self and benefit. But you also need to understand that if you don't stand firm against the devil's seductions and his lies and the ways that he will come at you in many different facets, it not only affects you, but it affects your spouse, it affects your kids, it affects your family, it affects your work, it affects your church family, it affects your nephews, your aunts, your uncles, your friends, your relatives, and everyone around you. That's why it's important to take these truths that Paul says. How do we get prepared? Who are we against? And how do we respond? And seriously consider these things and now begin to stand for your own personal benefit and for the benefit of those around you who may suffer by your lack of standing. So can we stand today? Let's stand. I don't mean literally stand. I mean stand. Daniel, thank you for leading the charge on that one. He was up and ready to go. I mean, let's stand today and make it our desire to oppose the devil by standing. And watch what begins to happen. As we leave today, hey, if you have any, if you want to come up here and actually we have is today the communion as well. As we leave today and as we take communion, this last song, the blood of Christ is represented through the emblem of the juice. That body, the blood of Christ is to resemble the blood that you should have been spilled. That his death on the cross should have been ours, that he took in our place. His blood the juice represents his blood. The bread represents his body that was broken and that was crushed on our behalf. And so as we come up this morning in this last song, as we take communion, do remember the precious blood and body of Christ that was shed on our behalf, the death that we deserve, but he spared us from through his own body and blood. And as you get done with taking communion, and if you need prayer, I will be up here to stand and pray. If you want to come up here and pray and lay on the floor, whatever it is, feel free to do so. But let's collectively, individually, and as a church, let's stand and stand firm in Christ and be victorious in him. And let's make the devil flee.